Hello and welcome. So I'm back, and this is just going to be a really quick video, but I haven't quite learned how to just record a video and then upload it on this new laptop I have, so I am coming to you live. I always encourage questions on my channel, questions, feedback, comments, anything like that, because I don't know what's on you guys' mind. And so I try to leave the discussion topics up to you guys to tell me what you want me to go over. So look up. Thank you. I just got this comment on the video that I did going through Revelation 4 through 7. And it specifically relates to a word used in chapter 6. It's the bow. And the comment was, can you open the hood on the reference to bow and then list the Greek word in Revelation 6:2? Something very weird about it, especially when you look at the Greek, as well as no arrows are mentioned. Yes, I can definitely do that. And this was actually part 2 of my first book, The End Times Timeline, A Journey Through the End of Days. And this is very fundamental to the pre-trib rapture doctrine also. I also discussed this. I'm sure that I did. I'm just kind of remembering off the top of my head. But I would have had to have at least brought it up in truth in defense of the pre-trib rapture. Because we can go through the language in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 to tell us that it's going to be pre-trib, that sequence of events, the rapture before the start of the 70th week. And that is, 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18 describes the process of the catching up of those who are have fallen asleep in Christ and those who are alive and remain. And then in the next chapter, 1 Thessalonians 5, it talks about the introduction of the 70th week. And in verse 3 specifically, talking about who will not escape. And then that is the start of the 70th week, relating it to a woman travailing with child and all of that. So that is a sequence of events that we gain this information from, and then we understand from 1 Corinthians 15 that there's a change that has to occur, and that change is explained in other passages of Scripture, but primarily because of John 14, that we have to be able to be taken to the Father's house. The promise that Jesus extended that we would be with him forever. And the only way that we can do that in heaven is to be changed to a form that can withstand the glory of God. Because the first thing that John sees in chapter 4 when he's caught up in the Spirit is the one who sat on the throne, God the Father. So there's an understanding that has to be gained, a sequence of events and understanding that why the change has to occur and things like that. And then there's imagery in Revelation 4 and 5 to explain that we're there in heaven, being shown as seated in heavenly places. It's where the present catches up to the prophetic, the things that haven't happened yet, but we know will happen because they're guaranteed. And, God doesn't lie, so the Bible's not a lie. It just tells us what's going to happen or what outside the scope of time already is happened. We just haven't experienced it yet, but we will. However, there's a little bit of additional insight here with regard to Revelation 6. And yes, it's very easy to say that's the beginning of judgment, but there's a bit more concrete evidence that the elders shown being seated in heavenly places, who represent this event that the whole body of Christ underwent, because if they have their white robes and their crowns, then everybody else does too. So, and the larger, the whole group is pictured in the next chapter in Revelation 7. So there's additional support and, discussion I can have around that too, but that's not the topic here. What I wanted to address is the specific language that we are given in Revelation 6 regarding the bow to let us know that something has begun. And that's the start of the 70th week. And this is a very, very simple word study to do. Really, all you have to do is isolate the same language in the Old Testament. There is so much imagery in the book of Revelation. And you can, if you don't find it in the New Testament, you're going to find it in the Old Testament to explain what we are being shown, what these pictures are being shown. So in Revelation 6, 1 and 2, that's the opening of the first seal. And we see the possession of the scroll being transferred from Father, who had possession of the scroll at the beginning of Revelation 5, after the rapture of the church, is depicted as having occurred in the previous chapter. And the elders are singing about having been redeemed from the earth in that same chapter later. But we see possession of the scroll, which represents the title deed of the earth and the methods by which the Lord will bring the world back under his subjection, so that all he has to do is return and take physical possession of it at the second coming to establish his eternal everlasting kingdom, which will be on earth for 1,000 years. But so we know that the first introduction of those judgments is the opening of seal 1. You have the three types, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and then the 7 vials, all consecutive. But it begins in Revelation 6:1 with the opening of the first seal. Now, how do we know for sure? I mean, we have to be able to know for sure that the rapture, that the elders pictured in heaven, are there before the start of the 70th week. I mean, we've been told all over Scripture that we're going to be exempted from this time period. And Revelation 3:10 tells us that, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon the whole world to try those who dwell upon the earth. So we have to understand, we have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is going to occur. We have to see the fulfillment of this. And we do in Revelation 4 and 5 know that these people, the present caught up with the prophetic, after the hereafter, we see them in heaven. But how do we know for sure that that is before the start of Daniel's 70th week? How do we know for sure that the rapture will be pre-trib? And the answer to that is found in Revelation 6:2 with the bow. That is exactly what that pictures, is the start of the 70th week. And here's how we get there. Very simple. Revelation 6:1, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals. This is after he came and took possession of the scroll, the unopened scroll, the still sealed yet unopened scroll, out of the hand of the Father in the previous chapter. And then he begins to open it, because in John 5, he told the Jews that he was given authority to execute judgment by the Father. So now we see the Son, who is given that authority, beginning to execute judgment. The first of which is here. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. So the first thing we learn about this is the white horse, and that is the one who comes in the place of. That is a reference to, well, we see the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords coming on a white horse in Revelation 19. So this is going to be sometime before that, and we know 7 years because of Daniel 9:27. So we see the white horse, which symbolizes the one who comes in the place of Christ. And that's further referenced when you get to, and he was given a crown. That crown is not a diadem, and that's a big distinction to make. The diadem is what Jesus will come back wearing. Many crowns, those are diadems. Diadems are the type of crown that is associated with positional authority. His position is as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It's not something that he overcame to get, like our crowns will be. The Greek word there is Stephanos. This is a Stephanos. He's given it. It's not his right to have, like Christ's diadems are. This is given to him. And again, this goes to John 5:43, where Jesus is talking to the religious leaders, and he says, I am come in my Father's name, and ye receive me not. If another shall come in his own name, him ye will receive. So they're going to give this crown, indicating this position of authority, by virtue of their acceptance of him. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. This will not be forced upon them. They will readily agree to do this for him, and they will elevate this Antichrist to a position of leadership. And that's what the crown given to him represents. He doesn't take his place. He's given his place. So How's he given his place? Well, that goes to Daniel 9:27. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. How do we know that the bow represents the covenant? Well, this is where the very simple word study comes in. And really all you need to do is go to the Old Testament and look for the same language. And you see the introduction of the bow first mentioned in Genesis 9:13. What does that verse say? Or what is the context for that? Because it's not just that it's mentioned, it's that there's a specific context given to the bow. So this is after the flood. This is after Noah and his family exit the ark. And God's making promises. So Genesis 9, I'll just start in verse 1. A lot of this you guys will probably be familiar, hopefully. It's here. This is just kind of spur of the moment. So, hello and welcome to everyone. I don't know if my stream cut out or not, but it's nice to have you here. And this is just a real quick, like off the cuff thing. So I'm almost done. Not going to be too long. But in Genesis 9, we have after the flood, Noah and his family depart from the ark. And these are the covenants and all of the commands that they're given in this new age on an earth that is completely different from what it was before they went into the ark. So in Genesis 9:1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hands are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. So this is where man was given the command to eat meat, not just be vegetarians as they had been created to be. This is where they're given the okay to become meat eaters. That's just kind of a side note. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, ye shall eat not. So they're not allowed to eat living things, and they are not allowed to eat blood or drink blood. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At your hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. As if they eat blood or life wherein there is blood. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And you be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. And God spake unto Noah and said to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. And with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. So this is God covenanting with Noah, never to destroy with Noah and his sons and with all of the animals, never to destroy the world with water again. And God said, this is the token, important here, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. So it's an everlasting covenant, an unconditional everlasting covenant. As long as there is this token, it will be a reminder to man and beast and to God of God's promise to never destroy the world with water again. What is the token of this covenant? And I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. So this is the first introduction we have of the bow, and the bow is a token of a covenant. We go to Revelation. Okay, so here's where word studies come in. And I use studylight.org. It's an interlinear study where when you bring up in the Old Testament, in the King James Version, it shows you comparison between the Hebrew and its Greek counterpart in the New Testament. So you can do word studies and say, okay, it appears in the Old Testament here, and this is its counterpart in the New Testament. So there's this word for bow in the Hebrew. It's kesheth. And I might be pronouncing that wrong. I don't know. But it's a bow. Well, in the Greek, the interlinear study, it's the Hebrew word the Greek word toxon. And that word is used one time in the New Testament, and it is used in Revelation 6:2. The bow in Genesis 9:13 was a token of God's covenant. That is what the bow symbolizes in Revelation 6:2, not God's covenant. It's a symbol of a covenant. It's a token of a covenant. Well, what covenant are we told begins the 70th week? Daniel 9:27. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he will cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate until that is determined as poured upon the desolate, or something like that. I don't often quote the last part of that verse. So we know that the beginning of the week is going to be with a covenant. And the Antichrist is going to, with the many, confirm this covenant. And they're going to give him this position of leadership as a result of it, which is evidenced by the crown that they give him. And then he goes forth conquering and to conquer, which is also the or in the place of the victorious king, which is what Jesus will do at the second coming. He will declare victory over his enemies type thing. So in order to truly understand that the rapture of the church, that the depiction of the elders in the throne room with their white robes and their crowns is a pre-trib rapture. It is indicative of a pre-trib rapture. There also has to be a definitive start to the 70th week. And it's not enough to just see it with the presentation of judgment or the beginning of the dispensation of wrath via the opening of the first seal. The first seal gives us a language to tell us that bow represents a covenant, and the covenant that we are told in the Old Testament starts this period of the dispensation of wrath, the 70th week, begins with a covenant. And again, that's what the bow symbolizes, and we learn that from Genesis. So it's not the Noahic covenant. It's just that the first introduction that we have to a bow in the Old Testament represents a covenant that God made, and that is the same imagery used to depict the covenant that begins the 70th week. So we can, without a doubt, understand from Revelation 4, 5, and 6 that the presence of the elders in the throne room with their white robes and crowns indicates that they have been redeemed prior to the start of the dispensation of wrath, the first part of which is the opening of seal 1, which is the Antichrist, to begin Daniel's 70th week. So we know beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we know that because of the imagery specifically with the bow. So that is what that means. Let me look at chat and see what I have. The original question asker. Mind blown. We see horsemen with bows correlate to weapons, which the covenant will ultimately be also a weapon. Yeah, I mean, in a manner of speaking, it is. It is the first method by which the Lord will bring the world back under his subjection, because it is the thing by which people must choose for or against Christ. The Antichrist is what will force people to choose for Christ or to choose not for Christ. I mean, sorry, my phone started ringing. That's literally what his purpose is to force people into a decision that have not yet made a decision, is to force them into a decision. So that is a judgment, because people are going to have a tough time during this period of time, especially when you talk about all of the taking peace from the earth and the famines and the pestilence and the judgments. I mean, destroying 1/3 of this and killing 1/3 of this and being tormented for 5 months by this. And it's just going to be a nasty, nasty time period. But in order to really, truly drive the point home that there is a pre-trib rapture, you have to be able to identify the beginning of the 70th week in Revelation, and that is what the bow does, is it represents the covenant, which is what we are told begins the 70th week, Daniel 9:27. The arrows, it's just, yeah, the bow is figurative language to represent the covenant. So it's not a weapon of sorts, but I can see kind of it's just a method by which the Lord begins to fulfill a purpose, and the purpose is to ultimately bring the world back under his subjection, so that, like I said, when he returns, he subdues it and takes possession of it. And that's what the judgments represent. The sealed scroll and the writing within it on the backside of the scroll represent the methods by which he uses to do that, the first of which is the Antichrist. Because again, that is going to force people to choose for, and actually not choosing isn't going to be an option. They're going to have to choose for Christ or for the beast, which is choosing not for Christ, because the middle of the week is going to force them to either worship the beast, the image of the beast, or take the mark. And the opposite of that is choosing not to do that because of the repercussions that the angel says, don't do this unless you want a taste of the lake of fire forever and ever. The smoke of your torment is going to rise forever and ever. So they will make an informed decision, these people. And then obviously for those who don't choose for Christ, who choose to worship the beast, the image of the beast, take the mark of the beast, they'll be part of that strong delusion, believe the lie, that all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. It's not that they're just going to be unrighteous, it's that they're going to take pleasure in it, and that's part of the second half of the week. But do you think the covenant the Antichrist confirms may be the 7 Noahide laws and the Sanhedrin is currently is pushing currently? No, the covenant is a return to the Mosaic law. That's why the temple and the sacrificial system is central to this, and why the cessation of the sacrifices and offerings at the midpoint of the week, the removal of the law, removing the restraint and departure from the law. I actually talked about that in the video last night, but no, it's the Mosaic law. Hebrews 8, when I was studying Hebrews, really brought that into focus, but it's essentially it's a non-recognition of the final sacrifice of Christ. And that's when you get into Hebrews 10, it talks about a willful sin. And that's not like, oh, I'm choosing to like, I don't even know. I can't make anything up at the moment. But it's not, the willful sin is the willful rejection of Christ. It's that you've been told the truth and you willfully reject it. And that's what the return to the sacrificial system and the temple worship represents in the 70th week, is a willful rejection of Christ. It's like you've been told the truth and you understand it, but you're rejecting it. And that's what it says, of how much sore punishment, suppose ye, shall he be thought worthy who had trodden underfoot the Son of God and had counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified an unholy thing, and had done despite unto the Spirit of grace. It's a rejection of the truth, which the truth is Christ. And that's what the resumption of the sacrifices in the 70th week will represent, is a rejection of Christ's final sacrifice for sin. And that's why when you go to Isaiah 1 and Isaiah 66, he calls God calls the sacrifices that will go on in that temple abominations. And that's what he's judging Israel for, is their continued rejection of Christ. And eventually they're going to get that taken away from them at the midpoint, which is going to force them to flee. And eventually the what's being hid from their eyes now will, according to Isaiah 26, they'll learn, they'll understand, and they will come to saving knowledge. But this is all predicated on a return to God, which is what Gog and Magog serves to do, to bring Israel back to one. But bringing Israel back to one isn't for the purpose of worshiping Jesus. It's for the purpose of understanding the God of Israel exists. And they will do something as one, give their one consent to the Antichrist who comes in the place of Christ, only to understand he's not who he says he is at the midpoint of the week, only to with one consent, make the right decision at the end of the week, and then be saved as one, which is what we refer to as the salvation of the Jewish nation. So all of this is predicated upon Israel being brought back to one, to first do the wrong thing and accept the wrong person as one, 7 years later to do the right thing and accept the right person with one consent and be saved as one. And so no, it's not the 7 Noahide laws. It is a return to the Mosaic covenant. And again, that's why the temple will be rebuilt and the reinstitution of the sacrificial system, because those things represent the continued rejection of Christ, which is what Israel's being judged for, and all other unbelievers along with them. It's completely why they're being judged in this time period, is for the transgression of rejection of the Messiah. And the old covenant, which Christ fulfilled on the cross, it is finished, in order that the blood atonement that he, this is my blood shed for the remission of sin. He fulfilled the old covenant on the cross and instituted the new covenant, which is superior to the old. And they continue to reject the new covenant, which is predicated on Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. So this is a spiritual thing in nature. What they are doing is completely spiritual in nature, and they will be judged for what that choice represents, and that's representing the Messiah in lieu of this law that he fulfilled. So that's what they're going to return to, and in the middle of the week, it'll be taken away from them, and then that will lead them to try to figure out what now. And that what now is, oh, Jesus, yeah, him. Call upon him and he will save them at the last minute. So hopefully that answered your question, but I'm going to stop this now. I didn't want it to be too long, but hopefully that will, you're welcome. Hopefully that will explain about the bow and how we have a very definitive understanding of the starting point because of what that represents. That is the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. The bow represents the covenant. And that goes back to the language first used in Genesis 9 to explain that the bow is a token of a covenant, or a representation that a covenant is in place. And that is what starts the 70th week, is the Daniel 9:27 covenant. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, until the consummation and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Yeah, the desolator. You're very welcome. So if you guys have any other questions or comments, I will try to answer them. I'll do like separate videos like this. But that was an important thing, and they're all important. And so if you have anything else, let me know. But otherwise, you guys have a good night. Thank you.